condolences. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry to have to tell you that. But
an ordinary woman, an ordinary night, a seemingly accidental drunken accident. But as the police began to ask questions, the cracks in her story began to show.
I mean, I didn't want him dead. I didn't want to kill him.
I believe you.
I never wanted to hurt him.
That's the confession from Rebecca Smith, who is accused of running over and killing her lover after a night of drunk driving. But the biggest question remains unanswered. Was this just a tragic accident or a moment of anger that had been building up for a long time? During the 5 hours of interrogation, Rebecca kept changing her story, hiding the truth, and finally collapsed. And it was from those trembling moments that psychologists discovered the dark secrets that she herself tried to forget. To understand how an ordinary woman became the perpetrator of a love tragedy, we must go back in time to explore the traumatized life of Rebecca Smith. Rebecca Smith, born in 1988, grew up on the small, old streets of San Antonio, Texas. From a young age, her life was marked by the shadow of alcohol. Rebecca's mother drank heavily during her pregnancy. Doctors call it fetal alcohol syndrome, a permanent neurological damage that causes loss of emotional control, impulsive behavior, and impaired short-term memory. Rebecca struggled with her studies, often getting poor grades, skipping school, and having uncontrollable outbursts of anger. She dropped out of school and took on odd jobs to survive. As a waitress at a Wingstop fried chicken restaurant, Rebecca's life revolves around long shifts, minimum wage, and bottles of wine. Friends describe Rebecca as warm but moody, quick to laugh, and quick to get angry. When stressed, Rebecca turned to alcohol as a sedative. However, alcohol only exacerbated her underlying emotional disorders. Rebecca had been arrested twice for driving under the influence. The second time, she was ordered to enter a mandatory drug treatment program, a clear sign that the dangerous cycle of addiction and impulsive behavior had become ingrained in her life. A life built on a foundation of instability, childhood trauma, chronic addiction, emotional outbursts. Those bricks had been quietly stacked up, bit by bit. Until that fateful night, all it took was a small spark, an argument, a sip of beer to burn it all down. It was the night of November 28, 2022. In San Antonio, Texas, the temperature had dropped and the streets were nearly empty. Rebecca Smith had been drinking since the afternoon. She stopped at a convenience store near Bandera Road to buy more beer. At that moment, she was planning, or perhaps just unconsciously, a night of wandering around the city. The person with Rebecca that night was Carlos, her boyfriend, whom she had known since he was released from prison in June. According to testimony, they had been drinking together, driving around, and, as usual, started arguing. Around midnight, at the intersection of Exchange Parkway and Bandera Road, Rebecca's car stopped at a red light. That was the last moment she clearly remembered before the tragedy occurred. Minutes later, police received a call about an accident. A car had veered off the road and hit a light pole near the West Fargo Bank. When officers arrived, they found Rebecca in the car, heavily intoxicated, disoriented, and not far away. Carlos's body lying motionless on the side of the road. Rebecca was initially arrested on a charge of driving under the influence, DWI. But as the scene was examined, big questions began to arise. Carlos was not in the car at the time of the accident, so why was he lying dead on the side of the road? Brake line? None. Marks on the road? The car clearly drove straight, with no intention of stopping. That's when the police decided to expand their investigation and brought Rebecca Smith into the interrogation room.
First of all, do you have any questions for me?
Not yet.
Not yet?
Not yet.
Rebecca Smith walked into the interrogation room, drunk, confused, but not yet fully aware of the severity of what had happened.
Well, do you remember the night of the incident?
Somewhat. I mean, I just remember just crashing. They didn't tell me I hurt anybody. They didn't tell me anything like that.
From her very first response, Rebecca demonstrated signs of distancing language. She distanced herself from the incident, saying only crashing without mentioning the victim.
You know, the attorney said that they got me for intoxicated manslaughter.
At that point, did you realize that you hurt somebody?
I guess it didn't like snap, or I guess.
She kept clenching her fists, an unconscious behavior that shows extreme anxiety and nervousness.
That's what, and you know.
He was there with me.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was stopped at a red light,
Mm-hmm.
or if it was green.
Okay.
Maybe the light was red and he
Okay.
got out and left.
And I left is possible, right?
Within minutes, Rebecca's testimony began to contradict herself. Initially, she insisted that Carlos was in the car. Then she hinted that he may have gotten out before the crash.
Now, where you say he got off, which intersection is that? It has lights, you said, right? Does it have lights there?
On the intersection?
No, where he got off. You're saying he might have gotten off here. What intersection are you talking about? You're there on Bandera.
When asked about the exact moment Carlos left the car, Rebecca's hands began to shake. A common physical sign when people are faced with internal conflict or painful memories.
I mean, I didn't want him dead. I didn't want to kill him.
I believe you.
I never wanted to hurt him.
This was the turning point. The instant reaction, the tears, the panic. It was only when faced with the fact that Carlos was dead that Rebecca began to show her true emotions. Despite admitting to having argued with Carlos earlier, Rebecca steadfastly denied intentionally driving into him. However, physical evidence at the scene told a different story. There were no brake marks, no evasive signs, and the distance from the red light to where Carlos was hit shows that the car accelerated, crossed 3 lanes, and hit the person. Rebecca Smith, a seemingly gentle and fragile woman, but in a moment of blindness and loss of control, caused an irreversible disaster. Throughout the interrogation, Rebecca Smith displayed a series of classic psychological defenses, signs that she was not being truthful from the start.
Condolences. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry to have to tell you that. But
From the very first minute, Rebecca avoided eye contact, a common indicator of insecurity and potential deception.
yeah.
I don't know if I was stopped at a red light,
Mm-hmm.
or if it was green.
Okay.
Maybe the light was red and he
Okay.
got out and left.
And I left is possible, right?
When asked about Carlos' presence in the car, Rebecca kept changing her story. One moment she said he was still there. Another moment she insisted he had gotten out of the car. This constant changing of the story is called cognitive dissonance, when the mind tries to reconcile truth and lies.
You know, the attorney said that they got me for intoxicated manslaughter.
At that point, did you realize that you hurt somebody?
I guess it didn't like snap, or I guess.
In addition, Rebecca's physical behavior, like clenching her fists and shaking slightly, is typical of inner turmoil. These physical reactions occur when people try to hide their true emotions.
I think I have alcohol fetal syndrome.
Alcohol what?
Alcohol fetal syndrome.
Where did you get that from? What makes you think that?
Because
When she couldn't logically explain the holes in her testimony, Rebecca fabricated a medical excuse. She claimed she might have fetal alcohol syndrome, a syndrome caused by maternal alcohol consumption. This is a psychological tactic called externalization, blaming external factors to reduce personal responsibility.
No, it's not okay. He passed away.
It was only when she learned that Carlos had died that Rebecca completely collapsed. This sudden outburst of emotion showed that she was no longer able to maintain the original false story. According to interrogation experts, when faced with incontrovertible evidence, many suspects don't confess immediately. Instead, they go through a process of progressive disclosure, from denial to evasion to partial admission.
I mean, I didn't want him dead. I didn't want to kill him.
I believe you.
I never wanted to hurt him.
When she said, "I didn't want to hurt him, I love him," Rebecca showed belated remorse. But before that, she had spent hours dodging, fabricating, and only confessing when she had no other choice. Finally, after hours of beating around the bush and covering up, Rebecca Smith had no choice but to face the truth. She admitted to driving while drunk, arguing with Carlos before, but always insisted she did not intentionally cause death. Rebecca was charged with intoxication manslaughter by driving under the influence of alcohol. If convicted, she could face up to 20 years in prison under Texas law. A moment of loss of control took a life and buried her own. One drunken night, one argument, and a life gone forever. Was Rebecca a victim of her own broken life, or the architect of a fatal tragedy? What do you think of Rebecca Smith's confession? Accident or the result of anger? Leave your thoughts in the comments.